Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for arriving so early. We will start in around 15 minutes. Good afternoon, everyone. And for those who are here a bit earlier, thank you very much for your patience. Allow me to introduce the title of today's webinar, Opportunities for Value Creation in Europe. As the title and the background may suggest, this webinar will be built off of the Economic Impact of Open Data 2020 report recently published by the European Data Portal. We are lucky enough to be joined by the two primary authors of the report, Esther Huyer and Laura van Knippenberg, who will introduce themselves shortly. For everyone's awareness, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared shortly for all of you to enjoy. And happy Open Data to everyone. Esther, Laura, I give you the stage.
Thank you very much, Aline, for introducing us and also the European Data Portal that our team at the EDP has been working on at the study, the economic impact of open data, but also, of course, on more topics today. Laura and me want to tell you more about our work around the economic impact of open data that has been so close to our hearts for the last months, or actually the last year. And I'm with the European Data Portal for 2 years now, and especially for this report, I focused more on the, let's say, European-wide top-down macroeconomics, while Laura was complimenting me.
Okay, yeah, so hi, Laura of Knippenberg. I'm very excited to be talking to you today about this report that we've been working on so hard. Also a little bit nervous, to be honest, but I'm very honored to see that there's a lot of interest in our report. And I'm also very curious to hear your input, so I'm also really looking forward to the discussion section that we will have after our presentation. And as Esther already mentioned, today I will be explaining to you more the bottom-up approach that's really based on real-life examples of open data reuse and mostly on how it benefits society. And we try to quantify them as much as possible to really show what impact there potentially can be created. So I would say let's continue with the good stuff. On the impact that is created, we have in our report delved into a couple of examples, but there's really such a variety of ways in which open data can create value to society. For example, like, how many of you have spent time stuck in traffic, or if you're traveling by public transport, have you ever found yourself waiting for 20 minutes or so in a cold train station because of train delays? Probably more than a few. At least I have found myself in that situation quite a lot. But with the help of open data, such as real-time traffic data or real-time public transport information, huge amount of times can be saved. It might only be just a couple of minutes here and there, but if you add it up over a year, and even a year for everyone in Europe, it can amount to almost 27 million hours that can be saved. I mean, just imagine what you can do with that kind of time. Another example is if you would imagine that a accident has taken place, or someone is having a cardiac arrest or any kind of critical situation. How great would it be if emergency services can arrive at the scene of the incident faster, or even better, if first responders can already assist them with first aid or CPR before the emergency services have arrived. If someone with a cardiac arrest receives CPR, first aid, before the arrival of the ambulance, it greatly increases their chances of survival. And with the help of open data and open data-based applications that are used in a smart way, people can get help in these critical cases, which in turn actually means that open data can help save lives, which is quite awesome, I would say. And as a last short example, I want to note more an environmental benefit. So I would be quite curious how many people of you have, like, how do you say it, like energy neutral houses, or have solar panels or something like that. I mean, you see it more and more often, but still it's it's not everyone that uses it, and there is a huge potential. And there's actually been research that tried to estimate this potential for solar panels. So based on all the European rooftop areas that are available, they created an estimate of how many solar panels could be placed there. And even this research is based on open data, which is a fun fact. And with the help of open data-based apps, so for example, using data on rooftop areas or even the slope of the rooftop, you can combine that with data on solar radiation levels, and there has been an application developed that, based on that data, gives consumers a support and advice on how to have the most optimal amount of solar panels on their specific rooftop. So in that way, open data and smart reuse of it, we could actually move towards more solar energy use, and which in turn also supports European sustainability goals. So these are only a few examples, and in the report there are several more. But even still, it's just the tip of the iceberg of what value open data can bring to society. And yeah, that's
thank you, Laura.
I think already quite impressive.
Yes, it is. And I love those examples, and I know that Laura could go on like this for the next hour, because we really looked into different applications and what is the actual impact and how can we quantify it as good as possible. So just saying, access to equal knowledge and language technology, translating, machine translation, biodiversity in oceans and forests. So there are a lot of really, really cool, inspiring examples. And we need those. I'm assuming the people in this webinar right now probably are open data enthusiasts, and we don't have to convince you, but there are other people outside that we need to keep on convincing so that open data stays high on the political agendas. There are also people in the private sector that still think that open data is something like nice to have, but nothing to actually make lucrative business with. Of course, people in research. So this is one of the main reasons why we are doing this, why we are researching the economic impact of open data, to have some powerful messages and arguments that support open data, reuse, and everything, all the strategies that are linked to it and support this goal. And you might now wonder, why is it called economic impact of open data? Well, you talk about environmental and societal goals. Well, for all of the people who were just thinking that, Laura is prepared and can also tell us a bit more about the cost aspect of all of these examples she just showed us.
Yeah, so basically these examples that we looked into have a very high intrinsic value. So the main goal is saving the lives, saving time, having these environmental benefits. But even these societal benefits do have a economic cost saving component. So, for example, the example that I mentioned about receiving CPR to people with a cardiac arrest, it not only does it improve their chances of survival, it also means that they will most likely spend less time in a hospital. So in that case, there's healthcare cost savings associated with it. The other example of saving time, well, time is money in the end. And if you would use all the time that you could save with the help of open data-based apps, and you would find the amount of what's it called, the labor wage per hour, then it would mean that in the whole of Europe, over 700 million euros could be saved just by saving those extra few minutes each and every time in the train. And this is only for the trains. And then for the solar panel example, I mean, it's great. It's really, really something that I'm very, very excited about and very passionate about myself, to go towards more energy neutral energy sources. but it also helps people save on their energy bills. So we have estimated that it's almost 80 billion that could be saved in terms of electricity bills for people in Europe.
Well, thank you very much. Still amazes me. So what is difficult when we talk about the economic impact of open data? I mean, this is super convincing. And what we told you before, that we were following two approaches: a bottom-up approach, which is what we just saw. So really digging into individual cases, applications, and see what bottom-up comes out of it, and how could it unfold for Europe if this potential would be totally leveraged. However, what we cannot do with these lighthouse examples is having a pan-European overarching argument about, for example, the market size. So this is why, complementing the bottom-up approach, we also worked with a top-down approach. And there we have 3 KPIs, which is open data market size, the open data employment, and looking at the open data sectors. Before I tell you more about our results, about those KPIs, I would like to emphasize how difficult it is to actually calculate, estimate, and forecast those numbers, because open data is an intangible digital good. That already makes it hard. And a few people would say, well, open data has no economic impact. Open data itself is just there. The economic impact is created when open data is reused, when it is applied. So one could argue that the market size of open data could also be called the market size of products, services, and processes that are enabled or improved by open data. And that, of course, makes it very vague, because how can we distinguish what is now just due to open data, or was it maybe also a little bit of other data, or did they just had really good marketing and the uptake was great? So how can we extract the value of open data in the application cases? So this is a little bit of one of the areas that makes it tricky, but nevertheless, we can make some statements, macroeconomic statements about, for example, the market size, where we first of all try to understand what could be the actual current market size. And then, so in 2019, this is when we had most of our research. And then from that numbers, we were thinking and exploring what are different scenarios, growth scenarios in the future. So what would happen if nothing happens? So our baseline was open data growth is just at the same level of GDP. This is not highly realistic. So we were using some growth rates and orientated them at the growth rates of the general data market, but then individualized those growth rates per country and the country's open data maturity that we have from our research and the trend over the last 5 years. And this is how we came up with our optimistic growth scenario, which for 2025 will be 334 billion euro of open data market size. And going on from the open data market size to the employment KPI. So we were thinking, if the open data market size can really grow that far, that big, what does it mean for open data employment? So we took first the same approach and said how many people are working in open data right now. And when I say in open data, you might wonder what that means. And we did as well, actually, for quite a while. And we define it as there are actually 2 categories, which is people that work directly with open data, and that there are also people that work enabled due to open data. So for example, in a company that is based on open data, but they're also not the whole day work with open data. So there's a section in the report which makes it more clear, but I wanted to clarify this a little bit already in this webinar. So, and then when we try to forecast the open data employment, we also said what happens if basically nothing happens. Then open data jobs would just increase in the manner how employment overall increases. But if we would take the growth rates that we already used in the market size, then the open data employment could increase to almost 2 million open data jobs in 2025. This is, of course, highly dependent on personal skills and value creation. So we know that value creation per person is a KPI that is interesting here for us as well, because in highly knowledge-intense sectors, the value creation per person is higher. So for example, in real estate, the value creation per person is higher than in manufacturing. So knowing that, that the market size will increase, we can make statements about the employment, but we cannot say that it increases proportionately. So only because the market size increases doesn't mean that just as many new jobs will be created. We know that overall more value will be created, but that can also be that the value creation per person is increasing, because what we saw in our research is that actually value creation per person in open data is still relatively low. So that made us a little bit curious to look into what are reasons for that. So we dedicated some time of our research to look into skills and how open data value creation is linked to general transformation of ways of working and skills in the course of digitization. And this definitely needs to be taken into account. And to understand this a little bit better, looking at the open data sectors helps as well. So we were looking at what are the high impact sectors and what are the high potential sectors, and where we can, how much growth can we see in those sectors. And indeed, we see here that, you see it also in the slide, in most of the sectors where open data is very promising or already has a high impact, the knowledge intensity is quite high as well. So again, we can see that value creation per person will be a very relevant factor when we want to materialize the open data market size potential of 334 billion in 2025. So now you might say, well, it does not just depend on the people, it also depends on how much open data is available and the quality of open data, the findability. And of course, all of this is true. Yeah, we can go to the next slide. All of this is true, and we also included this in our 7 key learnings that I would like to go through as the kind of end of our short introduction into a massive topic and a massive study. So data quality, of course, is a topic when it comes to reuse and reusability, and here the new Open Data Directive is definitely already a great step into addressing a few, if not maybe many, of those constraints that will to be seen, and we all have to support this to get the best out of the initiatives around high value data sets to really increase the quality and findability of those data sets that are thought to be have the highest impact. But addressing those quality and quantity demands, yes, it is important, but it is not enough, and that's what we see in our research, because that's point 3. The reusers have to be aware of opportunities around open data reuse and also capable of materializing those. So understand how this potential can be leveraged. So in the point 4, we say actually open data value creation is part of this wider challenge around skills and processes that are transforming under or in the course of digitization, which is a lengthy process. We are in it for some time now, and the impact and the change sometimes is not really visible and it's slow. And in relation to that, we also need to see the value creation of open data. So it's not nothing that realizes overnight. In point 5, we want to emphasize that making open data reuse and any supporting strategies sector specific is something that we might have been missing out on a little bit. So I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any cross-sector initiatives, but like tailoring the support approaches to challenges that are mostly sector specific also would help us. And here collaborations between sectors or between stakeholders in one sector and also between the public and the private sector is something that will foster value creation definitely. And that immediately links to, I think, a topic which is closest to my heart, to emphasizing that when we talk about open data, we should really stop and fencing it in, limiting it, because it is related to other data, to personal data, to private data, to shared data, to all kinds of data sharing approaches. So when we think about the example from Laura about someone having a heart attack, and that person might luckily use this open data-based application, making available her personal location, so that the others around her can actually see that there is an emergency and they see her personal location. So they can administer help, increasing her chances of survival. So what do we hear? There's open data, but there's also the component of personal data that is shared. And luckily we have GDPR that tells us exactly how we can do that. I'm agreeing, not in every case, but in many cases. So when we want to talk about open data value creation, I would really advocate for a holistic view, and that's what we say in point 7, is that any kind of data reuse needs its own approach, and this approach should be ethical, sustainable, and fit for purpose. So maybe also including some other data sources, and in that way we can really leverage the economic potential of open data. And I think those were our 7 key learnings. Of course, that was just a small introduction to the research we did. And now we're looking forward to your questions, your ideas. If you want to challenge us, we are prepared. But first of all, thank you so much for making the time, listening to us. And we are really happy to share what we discovered in the last months. Thank you.